So, hematopoiesis is also known as hemopoiesis. What's another word for hematopoiesis? Hemopoiesis. What's another word for hematopoiesis? Hemopoiesis. What's another word for hemopoiesis? Hematopoiesis. Hematopoiesis is the development of formed elements. And look, guys, that includes both red blood cells and white blood cells. Okay, that includes both. If it was just red blood cells, you'd call it erythropoiesis. So if it's just red blood cells, its formation, it's called what? Erythropoiesis. If it's all formed elements or all blood cells, it's called what? Hematopoiesis. Okay, and I usually prefer the word hematopoiesis to hemopoiesis. Where are formed elements first produced? Red bone marrow. So where are formed elements first produced? Red bone marrow. So where are red blood cells first produced? Red bone marrow. Where are white blood cells first produced? Red bone marrow. Where are lymphocytes first produced? Red bone marrow. What about neutrophils? Red bone marrow. What about basophils? Red bone marrow. So all the blood cells are formed in the where? Red bone marrow. But the only one that does not finish it in the red bone marrow is what? T cells. T cells finish their maturation in the where? Thymus. Where do T cells finish their maturation? Thymus. Back to what we did from endocrine. What hormone stimulates the thymus to produce T cells? Thymosin. Okay, so what hormone stimulates the thymus to produce T cells? Thymosin. Okay. All blood cells except T cells finish their maturation in where? Red bone marrow. Don't worry about this. No big deal. Okay. Now, the kidney produces a hormone called EPO. Remember, EPO stands for erythropoietin. So what produces EPO? Kidney. What produces EPO? Kidney. What does EPO stand for? Erythropoietin. What does the EPO stand for? Erythropoietin. Does erythropoietin, or EPO, stimulate red blood cell maturation? Yes. So if I said to you, what hormone stimulates red blood cell maturation? You'd say what? EPO. If I said, what hormone stimulates red blood cell maturation? You'd say what? EPO. If I said, what organ secretes EPO? What would you say? Kidney. What organ secretes EPO? Kidney. And what does EPO do? Stimulates red blood cell maturation. Okay? Okay, we're going to do this whole thing about detecting low oxygen concentration when we get to urinary and blood again. Okay, when we talk about blood vessels and things like that. Essential components, okay, yes, you need to know it's made of amino acids. Yes, you need to know it's made of irons. Yes, you need to know that there are vitamins involved. And next, a really big one is vitamin B12. Is vitamin B12 necessary for red blood cell formation? Yes. What vitamin is necessary for red blood cell formation? Vitamin B12. What blood cell is responsible for, what vitamin is necessary to form proper red blood cells? Vitamin B12. So is vitamin B12 necessary to form proper red blood cells? Yes. Okay. However, what factor is needed for the intestines to absorb vitamin B12? Intrinsic factor. What organ produces intrinsic factor? Stomach. 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 Does intrinsic factor cause the absorption of B12 at the intestines? Yes. Does intrinsic factor stimulate the absorption of B12 from the intestines? Yes. Is it just B12 or vitamin B12? Vitamin B12. What organ produces intrinsic factor? Stomach. What organ produces intrinsic factor? Stomach. Is intrinsic factor needed for our bodies to absorb vitamin B12 into the blood? Yes. Is vitamin B12 necessary for proper red blood cell formation? Yes. What gives blood its color? Hemoglobin. What gives blood its color? Hemoglobin. What color is hemoglobin when it binds oxygen? Bright red. What color does it turn when it is deoxygenated? Burgundy. Okay. O2 and CO2, are they considered blood gases? Yes. Is O2 and CO2 considered blood gases? Yes. What are the two blood gases? Oxygen and CO2. What are the two blood gases? Oxygen and CO2. One hemoglobin combined how many oxygens? 4. One hemoglobin binds how many oxygens? 4. One hemoglobin combined how many oxygens? 4. How many hemoglobin molecules are there in one single red blood cell? 250 million. So 250 million in one RBC. Erase that because that just does not look good. Okay. In one RBC. Okay, 250 million hemoglobin in one red blood cell. Okay. We have one red blood cell carries how many oxygens? 4. Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. One hemoglobin. What's going on with me? One hemoglobin carries how many oxygens? 4 O2s. So one hemoglobin, 4 O2s. One hemoglobin, 4 O2s. So when I say one hemoglobin, you say 4 O2. One hemoglobin, 4 O2. One hemoglobin, 4 O2. One hemoglobin, 4 O2. One hemoglobin, 4 O2. Okay, what is 4 O2? One hemoglobin. What is 4 O2? One hemoglobin. So how many oxygens does one hemoglobin carry? 4 O2. Okay, now, what makes up the hemoglobin? 4 hemes with one iron, so 1 iron per heme, so it's 4 hemes. 4 irons, 4 hemes. So 4 hemes, 4 irons. This is a heme, this is a heme, this is a heme, this is a heme. Okay? Iron in each one. Okay. This whole thing right here is hemoglobin. Hemoglobin's made of how many hemes? So remember, this is a heme. So how many hemes are making up one hemoglobin? 1, 2, 3, 4. So how many hemes make up a hemoglobin? 4. How many irons make up a one hemoglobin? 4. What do you call it when oxygen's bound to heme? Bind to heme and iron. Oxyhemoglobin. When oxygen binds to iron, it's called what? Oxyhemoglobin. When iron binds, and that should be CO2, guys. That should be CO2. That's not O2, that's CO2. When iron binds CO2, what do we call it? Carbaminohemoglobin. When iron binds CO2, it's what? Carbaminohemoglobin. Okay? What color is oxyhemoglobin? Bright red. What is carbaminohemoglobin? Burgundy. What color is carbaminohemoglobin? Burgundy. Carbaminohemoglobin means what? CO2 binds to what? Iron. Oxyhemoglobin means oxygen binds to what? Iron. How many irons are there in a single hemoglobin? Well, let's look at this. This whole thing is a single hemoglobin. So how many irons are there? 1, 2, 3, 4. So the answer is what? 4. Okay. Which one has a stronger affinity for oxygen? Fetal hemoglobin or maternal? Fetal. Which one has a greater affinity for oxygen? Fetal. What does affinity mean? Strongness, bindness. Okay? Okay, so this one. Let's go over some general things. What's the average lifespan of a red blood cell? 120 days. How many days? 120 days. Okay. What organs? Remember I told you don't worry about the bone marrow here. Okay. What organs are responsible for breaking down red blood cell? Liver and spleen. So what 2 organs are responsible for breaking down red blood cells? I think I just said bone marrow. I meant red blood cells. What organs are responsible for breaking down red blood cells? Liver and spleen. What organs are responsible for breaking down red blood cells? Liver and spleen. Does the liver and spleen break down red blood cells? Yes. Okay. How is iron transferred from the liver and spleen back to the red bone marrow? Using transferrin. So what chemical transfers iron from the liver and spleen back to the bone marrow? Transferrin. What transporter transfers iron from the liver and the spleen to the red bone marrow? Iron. What moves, see how I'm using different words other than just transfer. What moves iron from the liver and the spleen back to the red bone marrow? Transfer. What carries iron from the liver and the spleen back to the red bone marrow? Transfer. Okay. Heme in the liver and spleen is broken down into what? Biliverdin. What is heme broken down into? Biliverdin. What's heme broken down into? Biliverdin. What color is biliverdin? Green. What color is biliverdin? Green. What color is biliverdin? Green. Okay? Just remember verdin. Green. Verdin, green. So when I say verdin, you say green. Verdin, green. Verdin, green. Verdin, green. Okay. Rubin is yellow. Rubin, yellow. Rubin, yellow. Verdin, green. Verdin, green. Rubin, yellow. Rubin, yellow. Verdin, green. Rubin, yellow. Okay, so heme is broken into what? Heme is broken down into biliverdin, and then biliverdin is broken down into what? Rubin. Where is this taking place? In what organ? Liver. What organ is this taking place in? Liver. Okay? So HVR is what? Heme, verdin, rubin. Again. Heme, verdin, rubin. Again. Heme, verdin, rubin. Again. Heme, verdin, rubin. So heme is broken down into what? Biliverdin. Biliverdin is broken down into bilirubin. What color is biliverdin? Green. What color is biliverdin? Green. What color is bilirubin? Yellow. What color is bilirubin? Yellow. Okay. Bilirubin is now goes from the liver to the intestines. Okay, I don't care about this excreted in bile. We'll talk about that again in the future. Bilirubin is now in the intestines. Bilirubin gets converted into two chemicals by bacteria. What are those two chemicals? Urobilins and stercobilins. What does bilirubin get converted into? Bilirubin, go back up to this at the top. Okay. Bilirubin gets converted into uro and stercobilins. Okay, so what does rubin get converted into? Uro and sterco. What does rubin get into? Uro and sterco. Okay, uro is what color? Yellow. Sterco is what? Brown. Sterco is what color? Brown. Sterco is what color? Brown. Uro is what? Yellow. Uro is what? Yellow. Sterco is what? Brown. Does sterco come out in the feces? Yes. Does urobilin come out in the urine? Yes. Okay, you want to make sure you remember this, guys. What's another term? I'm sorry, what's the average hematocrit? 37 to 54. What's the average hematocrit? 37 to 54. Hematocrit is the percentage of RBCs out of whole blood. Okay? So what is the percentage of red blood cells called? Hematocrit. What's the percentage of red blood cells called? Hematocrit. What's a normal hematocrit? 37 to 54. What's a normal hematocrit? 37 to 54. 37 to 54 is a normal what? Hematocrit. So if you saw a hematocrit of 39, is that normal? Yes. What about 40? Yes. What about 50? Yes. What about 47? Yes. What about 59? No. What about 25? No. What about 67? No. What about 53? Yes. What about 23? No. What about 45? Yes. I don't really care about the red blood cell count. Don't worry about that. Hemoglobin is 12 to 18. What is hemoglobin? 12 to 18. What is hematocrit? 37 to 54. What's hemoglobin? 12 to 18. What is hematocrit? 37 to 54. What is hemoglobin? 12 to 18. Okay, what's the most abundant plasma protein? Albumin. What's the most abundant plasma protein? Albumin. What organ produces albumin? Liver. Okay, well, liver. What produces albumin? Liver. What's the average lifespan of a red blood cell? 120 days. What's the average pH? 7.35 to 7.45. Okay. Are basophils a type of, let's go over here. Are basophils a type of leukocyte? Yes. Are eosinophils? Yes. Are neutrophils? Yes. What are the granulocytes? Ben. What are the granulocytes? Ben. Ben are the what? Granulocytes. So therefore, monocytes, lymphocytes are the what? A granulocytes.